Montana Territory, 1878. Dust rose in lazy spirals beneath a sky that stretched endlessly blue over the rugged landscape of Broken Spur. In this unforgiving country where men measured their worth by the sweat on their brow and the steel in their spine, one truth stood firm in the mind of 24-year-old Ryder Ingram. Softness was weakness, and in the West, weakness got you killed. The early summer sun beat down on Ryder's broad shoulders as he worked the rope, his lean frame moving with practiced efficiency. His Stetson cast a shadow over eyes the color of a storm-washed sky, occasionally revealing a shock of sandy brown hair when he tilted his head back. 3 years as foreman of the Broken Arrow Ranch had hardened him in ways both visible and invisible: calloused hands, sun-weathered skin despite his youth, and a heart he deliberately shuddered against anything resembling vulnerability. "Ain't no room for love in this life," Ryder muttered to himself as he cinched the saddle on his Palomino Dusty. "Just survival and solitude." The statement had become something of a personal creed. He'd watched his father waste away after his mother's death from fever 5 years prior. The man who taught him to ride and rope had simply lost his will to live when his heart was broken. Ryder had made a vow then never to give anyone that kind of power over him. The West demanded strength, vigilance, and independence. Love was just an illusion that made men weak when they needed to be strong. "You heading into town?" Old Sam, the aging ranch hand, called from the corral fence. Ryder nodded, adjusting his holster. "Boss needs supplies, might as well get them before the storm hits." He gestured toward the darkening horizon where clouds were building in the distance. Sam's weathered face crinkled with a knowing smile. "New folks arrived yesterday, took over the mercantile, might want to introduce yourself, being ranch foreman and all." Ryder grunted noncommittally. New settlers came and went. Most couldn't handle the harsh reality of frontier life. He'd stopped bothering to get acquainted with folks who'd likely be gone before winter's first snow. The ride into Broken Spur took just under an hour, giving Ryder plenty of time to consider the ranch's needs. Cattle prices were down, water was scarce after an unusually dry spring, and the ranch owner was considering selling if things didn't improve. If that happened, Ryder would move on, just as he always did when circumstances shifted. Nothing permanent, nothing binding, nothing to lose. The main street of Broken Spur was little more than a wide dirt road lined with false-fronted buildings. The town had grown some in recent years, boasting a proper hotel, 2 saloons, a sheriff's office, and the mercantile that was apparently under new management. Ryder tethered Dusty outside the store and paused, noting the freshly painted sign. "Sullivan's General Merchandise." The bell above the door jingled as Ryder stepped inside, the familiar scents of leather, tobacco, and coffee beans greeting him. The store looked different, shelves reorganized, floor swept clean, new merchandise displayed in the windows. Behind the counter stood a young woman with her back to him, stretching to arrange items on a high shelf. "Be with you in just a moment," she called over her shoulder, her voice carrying a musical quality Ryder hadn't heard in these parts before. When she turned, Ryder found himself momentarily speechless. She was young, perhaps 20, with hair the color of wheat at harvest time, falling in loose waves around a heart-shaped face. Her blue calico dress strained slightly at the seams, accommodating her ample figure, full-bodied in a way that stood in stark contrast to the lean, hardship-worn women typical of frontier towns. Her cheeks flushed pink with exertion, and her eyes, a warm honey brown, widened slightly at the sight of him. "Good afternoon," she said, smoothing down her apron. "Welcome to Sullivan's. I'm Lily Sullivan. My father and I just took over the store." Ryder realized he'd been staring and quickly removed his hat. "Ryder Ingram, ma'am. Foreman at Broken Arrow Ranch." His voice sounded rougher than he'd intended, unused to such formalities. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ingram." Her smile reached her eyes, creating small creases at the corners. "What can I help you with today?" Ryder pulled the supply list from his pocket, suddenly conscious of his dust-covered clothes and the 3 days' worth of stubble on his jaw. "Just the usual ranch supplies." He handed over the paper, careful not to let their fingers touch. As she reviewed the list, Ryder found himself noticing things he normally wouldn't: the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the slight dimple in her left cheek when she smiled, how she carried her substantial weight with unexpected grace as she moved around the store gathering his supplies. "You're new to these parts," he said, immediately regretting the obvious statement. "Yes, we arrived from Missouri last week," Lily explained, weighing coffee beans on a brass scale. "Father always dreamed of coming west, and when we heard the mercantile was for sale, it seemed like Providence." "The West ain't exactly kind to dreamers," Ryder said, the words coming out harsher than he'd intended. Rather than taking offense, Lily simply looked at him with thoughtful eyes. "Perhaps not, but I've found that dreams are sometimes the only thing that sustains us through hardship." Something in her direct gaze made Ryder uncomfortable. Most women in town either flirted shamelessly or avoided eye contact altogether. Lily Sullivan did neither. She looked at him as if she could see straight through the carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself. "Your total comes to $4.72, she said, packing the last of his supplies into a crate. As Ryder counted out the money, thunder rumbled in the distance. He glanced toward the window where dark clouds had gathered more quickly than he'd anticipated. "Looks like that storm's rolling in faster than expected," Lily observed. "You might want to wait it out. Montana storms can turn dangerous in the blink of an eye." "I've weathered worse," Ryder replied, though he knew she was right. Flash floods were common this time of year, and the dry creek beds between town and the ranch could fill within minutes. The bell above the door jingled again, and Sheriff Davis stepped inside, removing his hat. "Afternoon, Miss Sullivan, Ingram," he nodded to them both. "Just making my rounds to warn folks about the storm. It's a bad one coming from the north. Everyone's advised to stay put until it passes." "Thank you, Sheriff," Lily said. "I was just telling Mr. Ingram the same thing." The lawman cast a meaningful glance at Ryder. "Only a fool would ride out in this, son, even for a man of your abilities." Pride urged Ryder to ignore the warning, but common sense prevailed. "Guess I'll wait it out then." "You're welcome to stay here," Lily offered. "Father went to help the Wilsons secure their barn, but he should be back shortly. I was about to make some coffee." Before Ryder could respond, rain began to pelt the windows with sudden ferocity, the sky darkening to an ominous gray-green. The decision was made for him. "Much obliged," he said simply, moving his crate away from the door. As Lily busied herself with the stove in the small back room of the store, Ryder found himself in the unfamiliar position of making small talk. He learned that Lily and her father had come west after her mother's passing the previous winter. Mr. Sullivan had been a shopkeeper in St. Louis before deciding a fresh start was needed, and you agreed to come with him. "Just like that?" Ryder asked, accepting the steaming cup she offered. Lily settled into a chair across from him, her substantial form filling it completely. "He's my father, we're family, where else would I be?" The simple statement stirred something uncomfortable in Ryder's chest. Family loyalty was a concept he understood, but had deliberately set aside when he chose his solitary path. Most young ladies your age would be looking for a husband, not following their father to the frontier, he observed. A shadow crossed Lily's face. "I've never been what most would consider a typical young lady," she said, gesturing vaguely at herself. "In St. Louis I was, well, the subject of considerable unkindness due to my appearance." Ryder frowned, genuinely confused. "Your appearance?" A flush crept up her neck. "Mr. Ingram, surely you've noticed I'm not petite." The fashionable ladies in St. Louis had a great deal to say about it, as did their suitors. Understanding dawned, and with it came a surprising flash of anger at the unseen tormentors. In the West, a woman's worth was measured by her strength, resilience, and capability, not the narrowness of her waist. "Folks out here care more about whether you can weather a winter than how you fill out a dress," he said bluntly. Her startled laugh was unexpectedly delightful, rich, and uninhibited. "Well, that's refreshingly direct. Is that your way of saying I might find more acceptance here than in Missouri?" "It's my way of saying foolish judgments are a luxury most can't afford on the frontier," Ryder replied, surprised by his own vehemence. "Out here it's what you do that matters, not how you look doing it." The rain intensified, drumming on the roof as wind howled around the building's corners. Lily lit a lantern as the daylight dimmed further, casting the room in a warm golden glow. For the next hour they talked, really talked, in a way Ryder couldn't remember doing with anyone in years. Lily spoke of books she loved, her hopes for the store, and her fascination with the rugged Montana landscape. Ryder found himself sharing stories of ranch life, cattle drives, and the changing seasons on the prairie. Their conversation was interrupted by a frantic pounding on the store's front door. Ryder was on his feet immediately, hand instinctively moving toward his holster. "Miss Sullivan," a boy's voice called out. "Miss Sullivan, please help." Lily rushed to the door, opening it to reveal 12-year-old Tommy Wilson, soaked to the skin and wild-eyed with panic. "The creek's flooding, Pa and Mister." Sullivan were trying to get the livestock to higher ground when the water came too fast. Pa's hurt, and your pa's trying to help him, but they're stranded on the far bank. Ryder was already pulling on his slicker. Where exactly? Willow Creek Crossing, Tommy gasped. About a mile north of town, the water's rising fast. Stay here with the boy, Ryder told Lily, heading for the door. I'm coming with you, she said firmly, already reaching for her own coat. No, you're not, it's too dangerous. Lily's eyes flashed. That's my father out there, Mr. Ingram. I'm not going to sit here waiting to find out if he lives or dies. The determination in her voice was unmistakable. Ryder recognized the futility of arguing. Fine, but you follow my lead exactly as I say. They rode double on Dusty, Lily seated behind Ryder, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist. The rain lashed at them mercilessly as they made their way through the muddy streets and out of town. The normally docile Willow Creek had transformed into a raging torrent, its banks overflowing with churning, debris-filled water. Through the curtain of rain, Ryder spotted two figures on the opposite bank, one prone on the ground, the other kneeling beside him. The roar of the water nearly drowned out Lily's cry of recognition. That's them, father's trying to help Mr. Wilson. Ryder assessed the situation quickly. The main crossing was completely submerged, but he knew this creek well. There's a narrower point about a quarter-mile upstream. We might be able to cross there. They found the spot, a rocky outcropping where the creek narrowed slightly. Still dangerous, but their only chance. Ryder dismounted, helping Lily down. Stay here with Dusty, he ordered, removing his gun belt and hat. What are you doing? Lily asked, her voice tight with fear. I'm going to tie a rope around my waist and swim across. Then I can create a line to help get them back over. That water will sweep you away, she protested. Not if I use that fallen tree as a guide, Ryder said, pointing to a large cottonwood that had partially fallen across the creek. Once I'm across, I'll secure the rope and help your father get Wilson across. Before she could object further, Ryder secured one end of his lariat to a sturdy tree and the other around his waist. He waded into the frigid water, gritting his teeth against the cold. The current immediately tried to pull his feet from under him, but he gripped the partially submerged trunk of the cottonwood and began to make his way across hand over hand. The crossing was brutal. Twice the current nearly tore him away from his handhold, and a floating branch struck him hard across the shoulders. But determination drove him forward until, finally, he dragged himself onto the opposite bank. Mr. Sullivan, a sturdy man in his 50s with the same wheat-colored hair as his daughter, looked up in shock as Ryder approached. Wilson's leg is broken, Sullivan explained quickly. Can't move him on my own. Together, they fashioned a crude splint for Wilson's leg. Using the rope line Ryder had established, they created a system to pull Wilson across the raging creek on a makeshift stretcher built from Sullivan's coat and branches. You go first, Ryder told Sullivan once Wilson was safely being drawn across by Lily, who had proven surprisingly strong. Guide him from the front. I'll follow and keep the stretcher stable from behind. The crossing back was even more treacherous. Halfway across, the water rose suddenly, nearly submerging them. Ryder felt the rope go slack. One of its anchors had come loose. In that moment, he made a split-second decision, letting go of the stretcher to grab Sullivan's coat just as the current began to sweep the older man away. Hold on, Ryder shouted, managing to grab a branch with his free hand while maintaining his grip on Sullivan. On the bank, Lily had secured the rope again and was pulling with all her might, her feet braced against a rock. The sight of her there, face set with determination, using her substantial weight as leverage to anchor the rope, struck Ryder as nothing short of magnificent. With a final Herculean effort, they made it to the bank. Wilson was already laid out on dry ground, pale but conscious. Mr. Sullivan collapsed beside him, gasping for breath. Lily threw her arms around her father, then, to Ryder's complete surprise, embraced him as well. You saved them, she whispered, her voice breaking. You risked your life. Ryder stood frozen, unused to such genuine gratitude, and even more unused to the warm weight of a woman in his arms. He awkwardly patted her back before stepping away. We need to get Wilson to the doctor, he said gruffly, uncomfortable with her admiration. They managed to transport Wilson to town on Dusty, Ryder walking alongside to steady the injured man. By the time they reached the doctor's house, the rain had finally begun to slacken. Word of the rescue spread quickly, and by evening, the entire town knew how the taciturn ranch foreman had risked his life to save two of their own. Ryder had intended to return to the ranch once the weather cleared, but Dr. Collins insisted on examining him for injuries. A deep gash on his arm required stitches, and the doctor recommended he stay in town overnight. The Sullivans immediately offered their spare room above the store. "I couldn't impose," Ryder protested. "Nonsense," Mr. Sullivan said firmly. "You saved my life today, son. The least we can offer is a dry place to sleep and a hot meal." That night, seated at the Sullivans' simple table enjoying a hearty stew Lily had prepared, Ryder experienced something he hadn't felt in years: the warmth of being included, of being part of something beyond himself. Mr. Sullivan shared stories of his late wife and their life in Missouri, while Lily spoke of her dreams for expanding the store to include a proper lending library for the town. "Books were always my escape," she explained, her face animated in the lamplight. "When the girls at school were unkind about my size, I could disappear into stories where people were valued for their character, not their appearance." "Lily has always had a generous heart," her father said proudly. "Too many people couldn't see past her appearance to the extraordinary person she is." Ryder found himself watching Lily, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of things she loved, how her hands moved expressively, the gentle way she attended to her father's needs without being asked. Her size, which she seemed so self-conscious about, struck him as simply another facet of her, like her golden hair or her melodious laugh. "People can be cruel about what they don't understand," Ryder said quietly. "Out here, practical matters more than pretty. A woman who can keep her wits during a crisis is worth 10 who just look nice in a bonnet." Lily's eyes met his across the table, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Is that a compliment, Mr. Ingram?" "Just stating facts, ma'am," he replied, suddenly finding the remnants of stew in his bowl fascinating. That night, lying in the narrow bed beneath clean sheets that smelled faintly of lavender, Ryder found himself unable to sleep. The day's events kept replaying in his mind, particularly the image of Lily bracing herself against the rock, using every ounce of her strength to pull them to safety. In that moment, he'd seen something that challenged his long-held belief about vulnerability being weakness. Her capacity for caring deeply for her father, for the injured Mr. Wilson, even for a standoffish cowboy she barely knew, hadn't diminished her strength. If anything, it had fueled it. The thought was unsettling. It contradicted everything he'd told himself since his father's decline and death, that caring too deeply was a liability, that emotional attachments were dangerous. Ryder returned to the ranch the next morning, throwing himself into work with unusual intensity. Yet thoughts of Lily Sullivan kept intruding: her smile, her laugh, the surprising grace with which she moved despite her size, the courage she'd shown at the creek. A week later, necessity brought him back to town for supplies. He told himself it was merely convenience that led him to Sullivan's General Merchandise, not any particular desire to see the proprietor's daughter again. The bell jingled as he entered, and Lily looked up from where she was arranging a display of fabric. Her face brightened immediately. "Mr. Ingram, how lovely to see you again." She came forward, smoothing her apron over her ample curves. Today she wore a green dress that complemented her fair complexion and brought out golden flecks in her brown eyes. "Miss Sullivan," he nodded, removing his hat, "I need some supplies." Of course, was there a hint of disappointment in her smile. "Just the usual items." As she gathered his supplies, Lily chatted amiably about town happenings. Mr. Wilson was recovering well. Her father had joined the town council. She was organizing a small lending library in the corner of the store. "It's not much yet," she said, gesturing to a bookshelf filled with perhaps 20 volumes. "But everyone has been so supportive. Mrs. Peterson donated her late husband's collection of history books, and Reverend Thomas contributed some poetry volumes." "Never had much time for reading myself," Ryder admitted. "No, what do you do during the long winter evenings?" The question caught him off guard. The truth was, he spent those evenings alone in his cabin at the ranch, mending tack or simply staring into the fire, deliberately avoiding the kind of reflection that might lead to discomfort. "Work mostly," he said finally. "There's always something needs fixing." Lily studied him for a moment. "Everyone needs stories, Mr. Ingram, even perhaps especially those who believe they don't." Before he could respond, the door opened, and several young cowboys from a neighboring ranch entered, bringing with them loud conversation and laughter. Their voices fell silent as they noticed Lily behind the counter. "Well, looky here," one of them drawled, eyeing Lily in a way that made Ryder's jaw tighten. "Heard there was a new gal in town, but didn't expect such a substantial one." His companions snickered. Lily's face flushed crimson, but she maintained her composure. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How may I help you today? The leader of the group, a lanky cowhand named Tucker, sauntered closer. Got any dresses that might fit a lady of your magnitude? More snickers followed. Ryder stepped forward, positioning himself between Tucker and the counter. You need something, Tucker, or you just here to prove what poor upbringing you had? Tucker's amused expression faltered. Just having a bit of fun, Ingram. No harm intended. Looks like harm from where I'm standing, Ryder replied, his voice deceptively calm. Miss Sullivan runs a respectable business here. You either shop with respect or take yourselves elsewhere. For a tense moment, it seemed Tucker might challenge him. Then the cowboy's eyes slid to the gun holstered at Ryder's hip, and he apparently thought better of it. No need to get riled. We'll take our business elsewhere, Tucker muttered, backing toward the door. His companions followed, casting curious glances between Ryder and Lily. After they left, silence hung in the store. Lily busied herself with arranging items on a shelf, but Ryder could see her hands trembling slightly. Thank you, she said finally, her voice soft, but you didn't need to intervene. I've heard worse. No one deserves to be spoken to that way, Ryder said firmly, especially not in their own establishment. She turned to face him, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude and something like resignation. That's kind of you to say, but I learned long ago that my appearance invites certain reactions. I've developed a thick skin. You shouldn't have to, Ryder found himself saying with unexpected heat. There's nothing wrong with how you look. Lily's eyes widened slightly at his vehemence. That's not the prevailing opinion in most circles, Mr. Ingram. Then most circles are filled with fools, he replied simply. A smile slowly spread across her face, not the polite, professional one she used for customers, but something genuine and warm that transformed her features. You're an unusual man, Ryder Ingram. The use of his first name created an unexpected intimacy between them. Ryder felt suddenly out of his depth, unfamiliar with the terrain of genuine connection after so many years of deliberate isolation. Just speaking the truth as I see it, he said, reaching for his hat. Good day, Miss Sullivan. As he left the store, Ryder was unsettled by the protective instinct that had flared so strongly within him. He'd intervened in bar fights before, stood up for those being bullied. It was the code of the West to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. But this felt different. The desire to shield Lily from cruelty felt personal in a way that both confused and alarmed him. Over the following weeks, Ryder found himself in town more frequently than his duties strictly required. Each visit to Sullivan's general merchandise lengthened, his conversations with Lily becoming less about transactions and more about their lives, hopes, and observations. He learned that she had a quick wit and a keen intelligence that belied her lack of formal education. She absorbed his stories about ranch life and cattle breeding with genuine interest, asking insightful questions that revealed her practical mind. For her part, Lily seemed to bloom under his attention. She began recommending books she thought he might enjoy, practical volumes about horse training or regional history rather than novels or poetry. To his own surprise, Ryder found himself reading them in the evenings, if only to have something to discuss with her on his next visit. Mr. Sullivan observed their growing friendship with benevolent interest. You've been good for my Lily, he told Ryder one afternoon as they stood outside the store watching Lily help a group of children select penny candy. She's always been careful about getting too friendly with folks. Been hurt too often. Ryder shifted uncomfortably. She's a fine woman, those who can't see that aren't worth her time. Sullivan studied him thoughtfully, precisely what I've always told her. She deserves to be treated like royalty by anyone worthy of her attention. When Lily's birthday approached in late August, Ryder found himself in the unprecedented position of wanting to give her a gift. He rode all the way to Helena to find something suitable, returning with a leather-bound journal and a fountain pen he could barely afford. For your library records, he explained awkwardly when he presented it to her, or your own thoughts. Whatever you prefer. The delight in her eyes as she ran her fingers over the soft leather made the expense and effort worthwhile. It's beautiful, she whispered. No one's ever given me something so thoughtful. That evening, mister. Sullivan insisted Ryder join them for a small birthday supper. Lily had prepared her favorite dishes, fried chicken, buttermilk biscuits, and a blackberry cobbler that reminded Ryder of meals his mother had cooked long ago. The simple celebration, filled with genuine warmth and easy conversation, stirred something long dormant in Ryder's chest. As summer faded into autumn, Ryder found his solitary life increasingly less satisfying. Hours that had once been filled with work, and little else now seemed empty without Lily's conversation, her laugh, her perspective on things. The walls he'd built so carefully around his heart were developing cracks. The first snowfall came early that year, blanketing the landscape in white by mid-October. Concerned about the Sullivans' first Montana winter, Ryder rode into town despite the cold to ensure their store was properly weatherproofed. He found Mr. Sullivan attempting to repair a leak in the roof while Lily anxiously watched from below. "You shouldn't be up there with your rheumatism acting up, father," she was saying as Ryder entered. "Someone's got to fix it before the next snow," Sullivan replied, wincing as he shifted position on the ladder. "I'll do it," Ryder offered, removing his coat despite the chill. For the next several hours he patched the roof, insulated windows, and chopped enough firewood to last the Sullivans a fortnight. When he finally finished, Lily insisted he stay for supper. "It's the least we can do after all your help," she said, her cheeks flushed from cooking over the hot stove. "Besides, the temperature's dropping. You shouldn't ride back to the ranch in the dark." That night, as they sat around the fire after Mr. Sullivan had retired early with his aching joints, Ryder found himself studying Lily's profile in the firelight. She was reading aloud from a book of poetry, something he would have scoffed at months ago but now found himself enjoying, particularly in her melodious voice. She'd grown more confident in his presence, less self-conscious about her size. When she laughed now, it was uninhibited and full-bodied, not the careful, contained sound he'd first heard. "What is it?" she asked, catching him watching her. "Do I have flour on my face still?" "No," Ryder said softly. "I was just thinking you look beautiful in firelight." The words slipped out before he could censor them. Lily's eyes widened, and the book in her hands trembled slightly. "You don't need to say such things, Mr. Ingram," she said quietly. "I know what I am and what I'm not." "And what is that exactly?" Ryder asked, leaning forward in his chair. "I'm not the kind of woman men call beautiful," she replied with simple dignity. "I've made my peace with that." Ryder felt something inside him shift, the final wall crumbling. He moved to sit beside her on the small sofa, taking the book gently from her hands and setting it aside. "Then you've been surrounded by blind fools," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because I find you beautiful in ways I can't even properly explain." Tears gathered in Lily's eyes. "No one has ever looked at me the way you do." "Then no one has truly seen you," Ryder replied simply. He hadn't planned to kiss her, had never allowed himself to even imagine such a thing. But in that moment, with firelight dancing across her features and vulnerability in her eyes, it seemed as inevitable as sunrise. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent. When he finally drew back, the wonder in Lily's eyes mirrored what he felt, astonishment at the connection between them, at how right it felt. "I've been fighting this for months," he admitted, "telling myself I was better off alone. That caring for someone would only lead to pain." "And now," Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "now I think maybe I've been wrong about a lot of things," Ryder said. "Including what strength really looks like." The winter that followed was the happiest of Ryder's life. He spent every available moment in town, helping at the store, taking meals with the Sullivans, reading by the fire with Lily in the evenings. What had begun as friendship deepened into something neither had expected to find. Lily blossomed under his attentions. When he escorted her to the Christmas social, heads turned at the sight of the usually solitary ranch foreman openly doting on the full-figured shopkeeper's daughter. He brought her the first wildflowers of spring, taught her to ride, and listened with genuine interest to her dreams of expanding the store. For his part, Ryder found himself transformed by loving her. The defenses he had maintained for so long gave way to a different kind of strength, one built on connection rather than isolation. He began to participate in community events, to form friendships beyond his working relationships at the ranch. When he spoke of the future now, it wasn't with grim determination to merely survive, but with hope for building something meaningful. It wasn't always easy. Tucker and his friends occasionally made snide remarks about Lily's size or questioned what a man like Ryder saw in her. Each time, Ryder's response was the same, unwavering defense of the woman he now openly admitted he loved. and a clear message that such disrespect would not be tolerated in his presence. Gradually, as the town witnessed the genuine devotion between them, even the most skeptical began to see Lily through Ryder's eyes, not as the large girl, but as the intelligent, warm-hearted woman who had captured the heart of the most unlikely bachelor in the territory. In early spring, when the first green buds appeared on the cottonwoods along Willow Creek, Ryder took Lily riding to a scenic overlook above the valley. There, with mountains still capped in snow behind them and fresh green grass beneath their feet, he asked her to be his wife. "Are you certain?" Lily asked, joy battling with lingering insecurity in her eyes. "I won't ever be slender, Ryder. People will always talk." "Let them," Ryder said, taking her hands in his. "I love you exactly as you are, your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. Your size is just part of what makes you Lily, and I love every inch of you. I was half dead inside before I met you, existing, not living. You brought me back to life." Their wedding that June was the social event of the season in Broken Spur. The entire town turned out to witness the union of the taciturn cowboy and the shopkeeper's daughter who had transformed each other's lives. Lily, radiant in a cream-colored dress she had made herself, moved with the confidence of a woman who knew herself deeply loved. Ryder, in a new black suit and with his hair freshly trimmed, could not take his eyes off his bride. "Never seen Ingram smile so much," old Sam commented to Mr. Sullivan during the celebration. "Used to think that boy had forgotten how." "Love has a way of reminding us of things we've forgotten," Sullivan replied wisely, watching his daughter dance in her new husband's arms. "Including how to be fully alive." When Ryder purchased a small parcel of land on the edge of town and began building a home for them, no one was surprised to see him incorporate a large library space for Lily's growing collection of books, or that the kitchen was designed with her comfort and preferences in mind. Every aspect of the house reflected his consideration for her needs and desires. Their home became known for its hospitality. Lily's generous nature found expression in regular Sunday dinners where ranch hands, townspeople, and travelers alike were welcomed. Mr. Sullivan moved in with them after selling the store to a younger couple, though Lily continued to help with the library corner she had established. 2 years after their wedding, Lily gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, followed by a son, Thomas, 18 months later. Ryder, who had once believed he would never have a family, found himself surrounded by love and purpose he had never imagined possible. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their children play in the yard, Ryder took Lily's hand in his. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "For showing me that what I thought was strength was actually fear. For teaching me that real courage is opening yourself to love, not shutting it out." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I spent years believing the frontier was no place for tenderness. You proved me wrong." Lily smiled, squeezing his hand. "And thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me, when no one else did. For treating me like I was precious when the world said I was too much." As twilight settled over the Montana landscape, Ryder Ingram reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from a man determined to need no one to the center of a loving family. The fears that had once ruled him now seemed distant memories, replaced by the certainty that in loving Lily, he had found not weakness but his greatest strength. In Lily's arms, the cowboy who once believed love made men vulnerable had discovered that true vulnerability, the courage to love deeply and without reservation, was the most profound form of strength after all.